What's up guys, happy Sunday. Today I'm trying to make a German chocolate cake. I've never made it before. It is my favorite kind of cake. So I found a recipe from Betty Crocker that sounded extremely complicated and had a ton of calories and fat and sugar. And then I found a upgraded German chocolate cake recipe from Sally's Baking Addiction, which I love their site, and I usually follow those recipes anytime I do muffins or any baked goods. So I'm going to try that recipe, following it as closely as I can with a couple minor changes because I don't have some of the ingredients, and cutting down the sugar just a little bit. So come on to the kitchen with me and I'll show you how to make it. Hope it comes out okay. This starts with 1 3/4 cups of flour, then 3/4 cup of cocoa powder, unsweetened, 3/4 cup sugar, 2 teaspoons baking soda, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons of instant coffee. It called for espresso powder, which I don't have, but I'm using instant coffee instead. Just whisk all the dry ingredients together until there's no clumps left in anything, and then set that aside and get another bowl ready for the wet ingredients. It starts with 1/2 cup of canola oil, 2 eggs. It's supposed to have 3/4 cup sour cream, which I don't have, so what I just added is 1/2 cup of applesauce and 1/4 cup of Greek yogurt. So I didn't have 3/4 cup applesauce, so making up the extra volume with yogurt, 1/2 cup of almond milk, and a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar because it was supposed to be buttermilk, but I don't have buttermilk. Then 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and just beat everything until it's very well combined. Now we're going to pour the wet ingredients into the bowl with the dry ingredients and add 1/2 cup of warm water. I'm not sure why 1/2 cup of warm water added separately, but that's what the recipe said to do. So that's what I'm doing. Maybe it's to dissolve the instant coffee, I'm not sure. And just mix this again until everything is really well combined. You can do this as a layer cake. I'm not that skilled in cake layering or decorating, so I'm going to do it as a sheet cake. If you do spray a little bit of a cooking oil spray in your pan before you put the parchment paper down, it's just a nice trick to get the parchment to stick nicely to the pan like this, so the paper isn't popping back up when you're trying to pour the cake batter in the pan. So just pour the cake batter in, and I use a spatula to kind of spread it into the corners and make sure it's an even layer in the pan before I stick it in the oven. This will bake at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. Make sure your oven rack is on the middle rack so it's not too high or too low. While the cake is in the oven, we're going to make the topping, which starts with 1 stick of butter, or 1/2 cup, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, which is basically just sugar with molasses in it. So since I don't have brown sugar, I'm also adding 1 teaspoon of molasses to the sugar. I did forget to mention that I actually cut the sugar in this recipe about in half, so the amounts I'm telling you are the amounts that I used. I'll link the recipe, but you'll see that it calls for about double the sugar, but I found that this was sweet enough this way. It calls for 3 egg yolks, so I'm just cracking the whites into a separate container here so we don't waste them, and I'll save those egg whites for later, like a little egg white omelet or egg sandwich or something. Then we add 1 can of evaporated milk and take it to the stove. It says to just whisk it occasionally until it comes to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, you have to whisk constantly, so I'll just keep an eye on it while it's on the stove. But meanwhile, I'm going to chop up the coconut and walnuts in the food processor. There's 2 cups of shredded coconut and 1 cup of walnuts. Now, it did not specifically say to chop these finer, but I do think when I have had German chocolate cake in the past, it does not have big chunks of nuts and coconut in it. It's just like a creamier topping from how I remember it. So I decided to just pulse it to a little bit of a finer consistency to about that consistency so you don't have big chunks in the topping. Now once it's boiling, you're supposed to whisk for 5 minutes and take it off the heat. It does say that it's going to continue to thicken as it cools off. So we're nearing about 5 minutes that it's been boiling. I'm going to turn the heat off under it. It doesn't really look thick enough to me, but I haven't added the coconut and nuts yet. And like I said, it's supposed to thicken more as it cools down. So I'm just going to follow the instructions, take it off the heat now, add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I didn't feel like measuring that, but it's about a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and mix in your coconut and walnut mixture and just stir that all in. Meanwhile, the cake is still in the oven. There's about 10 minutes to go on the cake, but everything has to kind of chill and rest and come to room temperature before we can top the cake. So I'm gonna cover this up and stick it in the fridge to cool off while the cake is finishing up baking, and then I will come back and show you how I top it once the cake is cooled down to room temperature. Now that the cake has cooled to room temperature, we're gonna take it out of the pan. This is just so that we can get the parchment paper off of it. The easiest way to do that is actually gonna be to invert this pan back upside down on top of the cake and just flip it over. So we're gonna end up with the bottom side of the cake on top. That's easier than trying to lift the cake off the parchment without breaking the cake. And this way you get a smooth surface on the top of the cake to spread the topping on. So I'm not sure if this is an official cake decorating technique, but that's the way I decided to do it. The topping did thicken up really nicely, so actually it does look like the perfect consistency for topping the cake. I'm gonna spread this in an even layer all the way across this sheet cake and try to make sure that I get it all the way onto the sides and the corners and smooth it all out. It's quite a bit of topping, but it's a pretty thick, fluffy cake, so I think it's a good amount. And I'm just gonna drizzle a little bit of chocolate. It's just literally melted chocolate chips for a little bit of garnish and a little extra chocolatiness. There's normally a chocolate buttercream that goes on this. That's optional, but I didn't do that step. I just did some melted chocolate. And this turned out really delicious. I would say 100% success. For my first try, I would 10 out of 10 recommend this. It was pretty easy. I'm sure if you did layers, it would be a little more challenging, but it's not really necessary because it tastes just as good. And it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but I will put the nutrition facts up here for you. It is a lot better than the original recipe that I saw. It's a lot less sugar and a lot less calories, but it's still definitely an indulgent treat. So the Betty Crocker version was 710 calories and 62 grams of sugar. So you can see that this is a bit better, and this did make 15 slices in the sheet cake. So that's it, guys. It was a big success. It was really so delicious. I love German chocolate cake. I didn't even used to like coconut when I was a kid. I'm not sure what happened all over the years, but it's now one of my favorite things, that chocolate coconut combination. So good. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you try making this at home, please let me know. And let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any ideas of anything else you'd like to see me try next.